Find everything your imagination craves on Audible. Stay up late with a tense thriller. Listen in on a swoony romance. Or get some new inspiration and motivation from the pros. And so much more. It's all there in just one app. Audiobooks, popular podcasts, and exciting new originals. There's thousands of included titles with more added every week, so you can always find something new. You'll find all the best audio entertainment at Audible, the home of storytelling. Sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Laramie.
Just a heads up. The following episode has brief mentions of suicide. Please take care when listening. If you're having suicidal thoughts or need someone to talk to, please call the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988.
Previously, on the Coldest case in Laramie.
And I know that you and your friends on the west side are very tight. You're a very select group of people. You don't think so? No. Well, then us white folks think that you are, okay?
I just knew that they weren't looking in the right direction, and they didn't have a freaking clue who did that, because if they're sitting there doing all of this to us, they didn't know what they were doing. They had no idea.
What kind of party were we having there?
We were just dancing around with them. I do believe they were playing quarters when I first got there.
What's quarters?
Well,
Was Shelli promiscuous? And did she like sex, I guess? No, we're looking for a motive.
Right after they said it was a crime scene, you literally saw half of Laramie police fanning out through the dorms. They had football programs in their hand looking for guys. They were just snatching up wherever we were.
I knew Jake Weidman before he confessed to killing Shelli. Back when I was 15 years old, his locker was next to mine at Laramie High. I remember him as a beanpole of a kid who sometimes buttoned his polo shirts up to the top button. Quiet, gentle, smart. A great basketball player. He was so trusted and so well thought of that he had been picked by classmates as a peer counselor, a keeper of other secrets. He was also black, one of the few kids in school. By Laramie standards, he had a famous father. Author John Edgar Weidman taught at the university. He was best known for writing a memoir about his brother, who had been convicted of murder. All of us had watched Jake's dad talk about that on 60 Minutes. But honestly, the thing that stuck with me most about Jake was how he used to stuff his uneaten lunches into his locker. It smelled up the entire hallway. I remember telling the principal on him. In the summer of 1986, the year after Shelli was murdered, Jake did something horrific that landed him in jail in Flagstaff, Arizona. That August, during a traveling summer camp trip for teenagers, he woke up in the middle of the night, grabbed a hunting knife he had bought at a souvenir shop in Yellowstone National Park, and stabbed his sleeping roommate Eric Kane twice in the chest. Jake then fled. After a nationwide manhunt, Jake eventually turned himself in and confessed. He said the murder was neither premeditated nor provoked. He only explained the stabbing as a, quote, result of a buildup of a lot of different emotions. In other words, Jake could articulate no motive, no reason, which made the murder particularly chilling. Jake had been in jail for a year, awaiting trial in Arizona for killing Eric, when he asked to talk to the same local detective he had first confessed to.
This is going to be a taped interview with Jake Weidman taking place at the county jail. Date is 8/20 of 87, time is 22:31 hours. Jake, I just received word earlier tonight that you wanted to talk about the murder in Laramie, Wyoming. Is that true?
Jake asked to speak to the detective because he wanted to confess to killing a second person, Shelli Wiley. Jake's story was that he'd been in an affair with Shelli. He said she was about to reveal this to her boyfriend, Alan Griffin. Scared about how that would play out, Jake said he went to her apartment. When he got there, he got into an argument with Shelli, and then he stabbed her 3 times. He said he then left and walked home, leaving a decoy knife at the scene, throwing the real murder weapon into a dumpster.
Good. What else happened, Jake? What else happened before you left?
Jake said he knew what the detective was referring to, the fire that was set in Shelli's apartment. That part, he said, wasn't him.
That was not me. I did not set a fire.
Jake got almost everything in his confession wrong. He mentioned a fireplace that wasn't in Shelli's apartment. He said the violence took place entirely inside. Throughout this first interview, it seemed like Jake didn't even really know where Shelli lived. The whole thing, the decoy knife, the affair when he was a gawky 15-year-old with a significantly older Shelli, it just didn't really add up. It seemed to trouble the detective in Flagstaff, too. Enough that he asked Jake why he was telling him this, whether he would ever admit to a crime he didn't commit.
Would you have any objection to talking to the detective in Laramie, Wyoming that has investigated this case and has more facts in the case than I have?
No, I would.
So if I arranged a telephone call for you to talk to him, you'd be willing to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to arrange that right now.
Sure, will you just give me a 10 count? I'm trying to get a recorder going, and I don't think it's working too well.
Ready?
Uh-huh.
Jake then talked to Lieutenant Gary Poles, who was still in charge of the investigation in Laramie.
Yes, Jacob?
Yes.
My name is Gary Falls. I'm a lieutenant with the Laramie, Wyoming Police Department.
Okay.
How are you tonight?
Pretty good.
Okay, well, I thought...
Jake repeated his story to Lieutenant Poles with the same inaccuracies, the same hard-to-believe details. In Poles' voice, I could hear skepticism of Jake's story. Poles told Jake that he needed to do more investigating to figure out whether Jake was telling the truth and whether charges would be filed. But that didn't happen. Hours after Poles heard Jake's paper-thin story, Poles charged Jake with Shelli's murder.
Think of all the places you can go with Audible. While summer may seem far off, you can take a trip right now, powered by best-selling audiobooks, popular podcasts, and exciting new originals. Let your mind wander and wonder, or get inspired with the very best stories and truly innovative voices that are changing the world. When you listen, the possibilities really are endless. Maybe you want to get lost in a chilling true crime mystery or a sweeping romance. Maybe you want to blast off to another dimension. Who doesn't? Or maybe you could use some pro hacks on how to better your business, better your relationships, or just get better sleep. And there are always knockout performances from your favorite celebs to listen to. The best part is you don't have to choose because you can have it all. With Audible, there are thousands of titles that you can listen to all you want, and more are added every week. So come to the home of storytelling and try it free for 30 days. You can sign up right now at audible.com/Laramie.
I'm Elena Bergeron.
I'm John Branch.
We write for the New York Times.
When I look at a basketball sneaker, I think about my reporting on Stick Slip. It's the science behind why sneakers squeak. I came to understand that we hear this type of sound all around us.
When I look at a basketball sneaker, I think about its impact on culture. I wrote about Melody Asani and how her work designing sneakers for the biggest male athletes can open doors for other women designers.
The New York Times.
Explore how we bring more of life to life.
At nytimes.com/life.
Jake Weidman's confession in 1987 didn't actually go anywhere. He never got as far as entering a plea. Evidence contradicted his confession. But the charges against him hung on the books for more than 3 years. During that whole time, the file basically stalled out. Nobody did much work on the Shelli Wiley case. I had heard the outlines of all of this before. I knew about Jake's confession, and that nothing ever happened with the charges. But the why of it had always bugged me. So I reached out to Jake.
This call will be recorded and subject to monitoring at any time. Thank you for using IC Solutions.
35 years on, he is still in an Arizona prison for killing his former roommate, Eric Kane.
You may begin speaking now.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. So I wanted to start by, taking you back to where you were at the time, where you were in Laramie. Did you know Shelli at all, or did you know of her?
I didn't. No, I just had heard rumors when the crime occurred. Was the first time I actually remember hearing her name, and people in the high school were talking about the case and talking about the fact that she had been killed, and that was my first encounter with her name. I mean, it's just to be quite honest, Kim, it's a really, really difficult and painful thing to look back on and to get back in touch with. And I was trying to do that this morning in anticipation of our call. Just kind of put myself back in that time, and I was still dealing with the mental illness and the neurological disorder that I'd had since I was a kid. Of course, the crime that I committed in Arizona had exacerbated everything, but there was also a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, both from knowing what I had done, that I had taken the life of Eric Kane, and also from things that had happened many, many years before. And by that time in 1987, a little over a year after I'd been jailed, I think I had attempted suicide. I know I had attempted multiple times, and I was just overwhelmingly self-destructive. And I was looking for a way out to take my life. And at that time, after the first couple of suicide attempts, they had put me in a cell in the jail, which was right down in the booking area, and had a great big window where they could easily look in on me. So it was almost like a permanent kind of suicide watch. So I knew that there was no way I could get away with actually killing myself. And so I thought about what I could do. And I remembered the Shelli Wiley crime. I figured that to that point that they probably hadn't found a suspect yet, because they didn't find one in the immediate aftermath. And so I figured that the fact that I had committed this crime in Arizona would make me a credible suspect, and I figured confessing to this crime in Wyoming would be the cherry on top of the cake that would almost guarantee that I would get the death penalty either in Wyoming or in Arizona if I was then guilty of 2 murders. And that was going to be my way out. So it was essentially a suicide attempt by proxy. And so I had convinced myself that this was the only way. There was this weird nervousness that I wouldn't be believed. And so when I was thinking about what story to tell, I kind of tried to make it as detailed as possible, and as I could sense that maybe I had gotten some things wrong just by kind of a skeptical tone of voice on the part of Detective Poles, I got more and more anxious and more desperate to kind of convince him, no, this was me, and just feeling deflated, which may sound like a strange thing to feel at that time, but like thinking to myself, this isn't working. He's not believing me. He's trying to believe me. He needs a suspect. I think part of him wanted this to be true because they needed to close the case, but there was just not the credibility there that he needed to believe me. And afterwards, after the interview, when I'm back in my cell, thinking about it and reflecting on it, I literally, started to cry. And I fell into this kind of temporary black hole where I thought, how am I gonna escape myself?
And so he leaves, and you think, I've failed.
Right.
When do you find out that he's actually, bought what you're selling?
Not until I know it was my attorneys who told me that I had actually been charged. And I was like, okay, whatever he may not have believed, he believed me enough to charge me. I mean, I was immediately excited. And I had every intention of, as soon as they took me up to Wyoming for arraignment, I was going to plead guilty right then and there, and not even allow any space for, a longer investigation, which might uncover the fact that I didn't do it, or, any kind of a trial or any kind of an evidentiary hearing. I was going to forestall that by immediately pleading guilty. And that of course never happened. I never got taken to Wyoming, never got arraigned, but that was my intention. I feel awful about what I put Shelli's family through. And I never took the time or the opportunity to apologize to them, and for a while I was told not to by my lawyers and my family for legal reasons, but that's not an excuse. I felt at different times a desire to reach out to them and apologize, and I never did, and that was purely selfish. And I feel terrible about what I put them through, both for those 3+ years, but also in the years since, by not giving them at least the clarity of having a letter from me apologizing and explaining why I did what I did.
Get immersed in the latest stories on Audible. It's got everything you want to hear: juicy memoirs, sizzling romances, chilling mysteries, and mind-blowing sci-fi and fantasy. Whether you're taking a brisk walk, exercising at your local park, or just chilling at home with family, you can always enjoy the best audio entertainment, audiobooks, originals, popular podcasts, guided meditation, and more. With thousands of included titles and more added every month, Audible truly is the home of storytelling. Sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Laramie.
Over a year of conversations, Jake Weidman told me a lot. About his angst and alienation in high school. About his guilt over killing Eric Kane. Court records told me more. Assorted psychologists and psychiatrists had diagnosed Jake with a variety of conditions: schizotypal personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, atypical conduct disorder, and eventually temporal lobe syndrome. There's no consensus. Regardless, Jake was found competent to stand trial as an adult in the murder of Eric Kane. After initially wanting to die, Jake decided to live. To avoid the death penalty, he agreed to a plea deal of life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. But as Jake became eligible for parole, Shelli's murder, and the doubt around it, hung over his hearings. Even though the state of Wyoming said Jake was no longer a viable suspect in Shelli's murder and dropped the charges, the case had never been solved, so therefore, maybe he did do it. That was the insinuation anyway. In 2016, Jake had his 7th parole hearing. He was released on house arrest with an ankle bracelet. One of the conditions for his release was meeting with a specific psychologist. Although Jake traded emails and left voicemail messages for the therapist, the two didn't meet. So 9 months after being released, Jake was arrested for failing to make that appointment. He's been back in prison ever since. Jake has had a lot of time to process what he's done and the effect it's had on other people. He was forthcoming about it in our conversations, even when I could tell it was hard for him. But in all of our talks, there was one place Jake just wouldn't go.
The only thing I really don't want to talk about, and that I would hope you'd avoid asking me about, is the whole Angelo situation.
The whole Angelo situation. When Jake made his false confession in 1987, he wasn't just implicating himself. Jake's initial strategy was claiming responsibility for killing Shelli, while professing ignorance about who set the fire afterward. That didn't work for Lieutenant Poles. Poles wanted a name. So after some prodding, Jake gave him one. Angelo Garcia. Jake said that Angelo was responsible for the fire, a co-conspirator in Shelli's murder. The one thing Jake would tell me about this is that he didn't know Angelo. He just heard his name around town as a bad kid. Puls knew Angelo well, for a lot of the same reasons. Angelo was interviewed by the police before, in the first week of the investigation. He was a usual suspect in town, and he hung around with Larry Montez. He was actually at that party, the one where Larry stole their friend Eddie's car and disappeared. In that first recorded interview, Angelo had an alibi. He sounded cooperative, talking about how Larry had gone missing. But 2 years later, within hours of Jake's confession, and with no other evidence, Puls brought Angelo in again.
What I desire to do, Angelo, is question you in regard to the homicide of Shelli Wiley. And before I ask you any questions, this is a criminal matter. I'm going to advise you of your constitutional rights, okay?
Who in the fuck is Jacob?
Well, we're hoping that you can help us with that a little bit,
Who's
okay?
Jacob? I don't know Jacob. I'm fucking pissed off.
Okay, keep cool. We're on good terms right now. This is a very serious charge. We realize that.
No shit, and I don't want to be fucking blamed for the fucking shit.
Okay, cool down. So let's talk about it. You willing to talk with us?
I ain't going to fucking jail for it because I didn't do the fucking shit. Alright? You gotta understand me too.
I'm trying to, but I'm not going to yell back at you. Let's
I
do
ain't
the
going
thing.
to jail for nothing I didn't fucking do.
Well, don't understand me wrong. You're under arrest at this time.
I
Let's talk
understand
about
that.
it, okay?
Alright.
Okay. Angela, are you acquainted with Shelli Wiley?
I never even knew the chick.
You never knew her?
Besides Lori, her sister.
Uh-huh. What was your relationship with
I knew that Lori and her were sisters, but fuck, I never even spoke to the chick or nothing. As for as much as Jacob, whoever the fuck Jacob is, I don't even know who the fucking pound is either.
Jacob Weidman was a resident of Laramie. He's what we call a mulatto. He's a kind of a half-white black kid that is currently in Arizona right now. He says you torched the place, Angela. You were with him.
Well, that's true.
If that wasn't true, why would he be saying that?
I don't know, man. You don't even know me.
He says he knows you. I talked to him at midnight this morning and interviewed the man for 2.5 hours, and he says you were with him. Did you ever go to Shakey's? You know where Shakey's used to be?
Yeah.
Well, the building is still there, but it's the Prairie School now. Jacob Weidman told me that you picked him up there that night at approximately 10:30 p.m.
Sure, you fuck did.
He further advised me that you made arrangements with him at the park at about 11 a.m. that day to do that, to pick him up.
This dude's fucking crazy, man.
I don't know where he's coming with the information, Angelo, but that's exactly what he told me. I think, you realize that I'm being upfront with you, and I'm telling you exactly what the information is that we know.
Hey, I ain't got nothing to hide, man. Okay. I gave you all the information I had, and I'm trying to straighten out my shit here, and you guys are over trying to...
No, we're not trying to do anything to you. We're just trying to get to the facts, okay? And right now we've got information that this person's telling us that you're involved in the murder and the fire that killed Shelli Wiley.
This dude...
That's a capital offense. You don't realize that there's a death penalty offense.
No shit.
That is exactly right. Now, they haven't executed anybody in the state of Wyoming for many years, but there's people on death row awaiting execution. It's very
What
serious.
happens if, like, say if somebody's innocent and they put him away for so many years and they come back out and get evidence and shit? And what could happen?
If I have information pertaining to that, I don't want to put an innocent person in jail.
That's right.
I have a duty to do that, to protect you as well as anybody else.
I ain't gonna go to jail just because some chump says it was me.
Well, that's exactly what has been said, Angelo.
Yeah.
Do you know who killed Shelli Wiley?
I sure don't. If I knew, I'd probably tell you right now.
Well, I told you, we've had lots of sources come in and tell us that you're responsible for killing Shelli Wiley. Is there any truth to that?
It's completely false, but I did not touch the chick. I didn't even know the chick. Why should I kill the chick? I may be crazy, but I'm not insane, man.
No. Well, I'm not saying you
right
are.
here is gonna make me go insane.
No.
Fuck, I'm serious.
What can you help us out about? Why would this Jacob Weidman be telling you, us, and telling me specifically that you set that house on fire?
I don't know, sir. Shit, if I knew why this guy's trying to set me up, I'd probably tell you, but I don't know why.
Okay. Well, I'll terminate the interview at 4:05 p.m.
After Lieutenant Poles interrogated him, Angelo was actually briefly charged with arson and murder. I didn't know Angelo Garcia back when I lived in Laramie, but I knew of him. He was a few years older than me, but had dropped out of school in junior high. Angelo was known mostly for smoking weed, getting in fights, throwing parties, and dating younger girls. He had a hair-triggered temper and a long-running beef with law enforcement. One example. After police brought him into jail on a minor violation a few months before this interview, Angelo had slammed his head against the wall, breaking the sheetrock. Rather than get him help, authorities charged him with a crime: destroying property. Can we get you some bad coffee or some water?
Water's fine.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Angelo met me at a basement Airbnb in Laramie. He was short and wiry, with a graying flat top and a goatee. He dressed casual, jeans and a black sweatshirt with white prayer hands on it. He seemed guarded at first, but open to talking. I introduced him to my dog, Lucy. She was clearly excited to see him.
What's going on, bub? It's a good doggy.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart. From the police files, I knew Angelo had nothing to do with Shelli's murder. He was alibied from the very start. But he was arrested anyway. His name splashed all over the front page of the local paper. In a case where there had been 3 arrests made in 37 years, Angelo stood out to me as the most arbitrary, the most avoidable. And so what is this like? You're like being accused of this thing that you like have no idea what they're talking about. What is this like for you?
I mean, at first, it's like, whatever, I'll go down, you need to question me, no problem, But, when they started telling me all this stuff that we're going to give you the death penalty, this and that, and, you start saying, whoa, I didn't do this, I never had nothing to do with it. I wasn't there, nothing, So.
Do you remember where you were that night?
Oh, yeah. We were drinking, playing quarters. I was a little drunk, and I fell asleep. And they woke me up. Said, Larry stole Lady's car. We need to go look for him. So we went driving around looking for Larry. Couldn't find him anywhere. Get back to the house that we're partying at. And Larry was hiding in my uncle's car. Why he was hiding, I don't know, because, he brought the car back. Why he had a change of clothes, I don't know. Why he didn't have any glasses on, I don't know. So, that always made me think, what's going on? But, I don't know.
Maybe he had something to do with it?
I don't know. It'll be like me accusing him like they did to me. But I always thought that. I don't know.
Back then.
I looked for answers. I couldn't find any. I lived with Montez for a while because I didn't have nowhere to be. He was always my friend. But I can't accuse somebody because I know the hurt that it does to you,
Do you ever remember even meeting Jake Weidman?
I don't even think I met him. I don't even think I know this kid. You know what I mean? It's like, who is he? I don't even know him. So, I know, his brother was in my grade, I knew him when he played basketball, but I don't even remember which one was which. So,
yeah.
I just don't know the kid.
Why do you think he would have named you like this?
I have no idea.
Because
did he even do it?
No.
I don't know.
No, I mean, like, he's been very much ruled out, and he himself has said that, like, he was lying, and he just was saying this because he wanted to die. You know, because he'd already been arrested on this murder charge in Arizona because he had killed a kid down there. He definitely did that. And that, like, he just sort of made this decision to confess to this case. And, you know, I can't seem to get an answer out of him because I'm talking to him about, like, why did you finger this guy? Right. What he said was that he just had heard your name around as being, like, a bad kid, you know?
You know, I was a good fighter back in the day, you know. And, you know, that's just the way we grew up on the West Side. Everybody always wanted to see who was the baddest and whatever. And so I was a good fighter. So what? You know? What's that got to do with anything, you know?
Do you remember when you found out about the guy being arrested like 5 years ago?
Oh, man, my cousin Rita, she sent me a message on my phone, and she goes, look at Laramie Live. You know, okay, what is she talking about? So I looked on there, and, you know, they had lamb, whatever, you know. Okay. So I started crying with so much happiness. They finally caught him. That was the happiest day of my life. I told my family, well, you know what? It was one of their own. You know, one of their own. It just made me so happy that they finally caught somebody, you know. I called my mom up right away. They caught the murderer, Mom.
What did she say?
She didn't know what to say.
Do you think she had believed you didn't do it before?
Probably, I don't know.
You never talked to her about that. She knows you're upset and needs to give you some comfort.
That's good. Not very many people know how to do that. Well,
good job.
2 days after Angelo was charged with murder and arson, Jake talked to Lieutenant Poles again. After learning about the charges against Angelo, Jake told Poles that Angelo wasn't involved. It took another couple of days for the charges against Angelo to be dropped. He spent the whole time in jail. For a few years after, Angelo had a rough go of it. He piled up more criminal charges, never quite got his feet on the ground. Did workaday jobs in construction or restaurants, mostly. But eventually he got his life together, got married, had 8 kids, found God. After the charges were eventually dropped against Jake, the investigation into who killed Shelli Wiley was back at square one. By this point, Poles was leaving the case behind him. He had just been elected sheriff. Pull for Poles was his campaign slogan. The case passed to another detective in 1991. I started reading through everything that the new detective did next. I could see that he pursued various theories over the next dozen or so years. He looked at Jake, again. He looked particularly hard at a long-haul trucker who'd confessed to 70 rapes, and then a man who had killed and raped a coworker's roommate in a town about 300 miles from Laramie. No theory panned out. Looking through the case file, it seemed like the new detective wasn't dedicating much time to the case. He wasn't doing fresh interviews. He didn't appear to be revisiting what the police may have missed. The investigation started to resemble more of a training exercise than an open case. A couple of boxes of files handed over to a succession of new detectives with a shrug. Sure, give it a spin. Everyone else has. It took almost 30 years for another arrest to be made in the case. for another new detective to take a closer look at the file and see something the others hadn't. Almost 30 years to arrive back at the crime scene and reconsider the question, what about Fred Lamb?